All right, and now the debut on television we've all been waiting for, Collision, finally came to fruition on June 17th, the debut from the United Center in Chicago. CM Punk returns to television, and I trend on Twitter. How the does that work, Brian?
Well, some of the fans who... Obviously, this show is geared towards a certain fan base, and some of the fans who are not in that fan base may have lost their minds a little bit at seeing a Jim Cornette face t-shirt on their show.
A Cornette face shirt or a Cornette face sign or a fucking, like Mussolini sign, or we had a presence there. The cult was there.
But it wasn't just unavoidable, it was also purposely shown, let's be honest.
Well, I mean, they know what a safe shot is for the, for the audience that they're going for.
Hey, Saturday night's all right for fighting. What do you think?
Hey, that's a great idea. As a matter of fact, I like using Saturday night's all right for fighting for a wrestling show so much, I'm going to use it in Smoky Mountain Wrestling in 1992.
That was the best video because you got to see every single star that had come in the entire year. Terry Gordy, the Wild Bunch, all the guys that weren't there at the end of the year. It was awesome. It was tremendous.
Tremendous. Well, anyway, but I'm not pissing on it. No, I like it. I like that Tony is willing to spend some of his money on actual music, because nobody can deny that commercial music combined with wrestling, that's what made the rock and wrestling era. That's what made all the guys' entrances in the 80s so iconic. So, and also because the WWE Raw and SmackDown have the worst fucking opening music for shows in the history of wrestling. So this is refreshing.
All wrestling shows for the last generation have had bad opening music. So it isn't even just the idea of licensing the Elton John song, which is almost 50 years old, but it's a classic and it still sounds great. It's a different sound than every other show. It's a different feeling just from the jump than all the other shows because of the music.
It's not just constant. All right.
Are you ready?
Are you ready for?
I'm ready to press mute.
Yeah, I'm ready for all the fucking talking you're going to do to me. But anyway, Kevin Kelly and Nigel, the announcers, I think we needed a quick on camera. I know they wanted to pan the crowd and get right to the entrance, but at the same time, because they are new faces in the company, as well as this being a new television show, I would have loved to have said, because they have the announcers at ringside, which is obviously much better than sitting them up. From an announcer's standpoint, I can tell you I'd rather be at the table at ringside than sitting up on the stage. It's awkward and it takes you out of it. So they could have swung by for an on-camera, but nevertheless, they transitioned from these sweeping crowd shots to like Mussolini. It's our man Phil. And he's back and he's going to raise some hill.
Oh.
Well, I couldn't call him Phil, could I?
Pathetic.
But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this review is brought to you by the official Cornette Face t-shirt, available at JimCornette.com. Wear it to Collision tapings and CM Punk will wink at you. Now back to our review. So it was a huge ovation, and he brought the bag with the belt that he never lost, his wrestling shoes around his neck, and his first words were basically, I'm tired of being nice. No more Mr. Nice Guy for the Punkster. And this is the professional wrestling business. And he put over Chicago and the fans. He started the first of several times that he said what may be a new trademark. I don't like the word catchphrase. It's a trademark line for him. Tell me when I'm telling lies, which might be something that he can use quite often around that place when everybody else is singing, tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies, tell me lies, tell me lies.
Stop singing on the show, please.
So he said some people hate me for the same reason that you love me, Chicago. And I understand that the sheer magnitude of me makes some people uncomfortable. This guy, and then the fans start chanting, fuck the elite, of course. And again, he is so brilliant verbally, such a cunning linguist, that he doesn't have to do the cheap shit that's obvious to get people to chant derogatory things about people he doesn't like. He can just make a blanket statement and they get the point. And one that got a lot of traction, as they say, on social media was David Zaslav, who I had to check on that one, but he's, I guess, the president of Warner Brother Discovery Media Conglomerate. But he said, David Zaslav calls me One Bill Phil because I'm the one true article in a business of counterfeit bucks. And that one landed, and then he winked at the guy in the Cornette face shirt. And, it was a brilliant double-edged promo, I thought, because for the casual fan, if there indeed exists that animal, but just for the sake of logic and continuity on the television program, if nothing else. He talked about never having lost the belt. He talked about his tricep injury, tearing the muscle off the bone. He talked about surgery and the rehab. He talked about always being himself and never compromising. And it was a straight, and he's coming back to regain the recognition that he never lost with that belt in the bag, etc. If you didn't know anything past what you'd seen on television, it was a strong babyface return promo in his hometown arena with a bunch of people there. And for the majority of people, honestly, that are into this company in this day and age, that do know what happened, there was enough remarks without coming out and saying things that he addressed that too. And with the pops that he was getting from the crowd, one would think that Chicago would fall into that category of being the people who were up on it. And, again, he said, for those of you who feel they're owed an apology, I'm sorry. The only people softer than you are the wrestlers you like. And we know exactly where that's going.
And he's not wrong.
And then a brilliant line was, he reminds everybody when he reminded them that he had that he won the belt and never lost it. He said, because I didn't have the best dog collar match, I won the dog collar match. And this is mine until somebody pins me or submits me. And until somebody can fill these boots, they belong on my feet. Mic drop. Boom. 12 minutes. He had them on the edge of their seats. They liked everything he said. It was well done. It hit all the right spots. And here we go.
There's not too much I could add to that. Strong promo. I think with some people, there's a little bit of disappointment that there aren't going to be more direct shots, which I'm guessing there won't be until everyone decides to work together and be friends. But it was the reintroduction that he needed, exactly where it needed to be. And it was a promising start. I wanted to go into this show with some optimism that AEW will do something right. They did his debut right. And I think his return was really good. The only thing I wouldn't have done, minor thing to go to your point earlier, I wouldn't have had the commentators say anything until after this and you could show them, as opposed to hearing any voices at all before that, because you could barely hear them with the way AEW mics the crowd. And
yeah, well, and that would have been a way to do it, and I can see that. At the same point, I think they feel like they had to welcome everyone at the top of the brand new program, and never been a program in this series. But the bigger issue, I thought it was me and my bad hearing. And I tried this on 2 different televisions, but in a lot of cases, the mix of the announcers was buried in the crowd. And I know it was a rowdy crowd, but these things are controllable. Did you have problems hearing them also?
I did. And in general, I always have issues with AEW audio. And I get that different people get different feeds. Like if you're watching it on TV versus the internet feed, you may get different audio. But on TV, traditionally, it's rough. Now, sometimes you could tell it's not you, it's them. Now, sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can tell it's in the house, it's on the mic. Like there's nothing that's going to change it there. But other times you could tell it's the mix. And Kevin Kelly's not Excalibur, and I mean that in a very good way. He's not just screaming at you. So maybe they weren't prepared for a human being, an adult, doing commentary here, but also the fans were loud. That's why I would have just start the show with Punk. That's what everyone's there to see. Start it with Punk, then go to the commentators. Then the crowd would have started dying down anyway. You would have been able to hear them better.
Yes, because when you got the crowd screaming and the music and the announcers vying for your aural, A-U-R-A-L attention, it does get problematic.
Which two commentators yell less than Nigel McGuinness and Kevin Kelly?
Well, and
I mean that in a good way. I'm not saying that in a bad way.
Well, Ian Riccaboni and Caprice Coleman.
That's true.
And so now there are two accomplished announcing teams out there floating around in the wrestling industry. One is now finally employed in AEW, Nigel McGuinness and Kevin Kelly. And hopefully our friend Ian Riccaboni and his sidekick Caprice Coleman will land somewhere that we actually care about watching.
Yeah, on Wednesday Night Gorilla, whatever that show is.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of gorillas, would you have placed the TNT title match between Wardlow and Dino Douche, where they did right after the Punk interview, first match on this program? It's supposed to be,
you know what?
Allegedly supposed to be more about great wrestling.
Not only would I have not done that, in watching this show live, this was the one thing I wasn't a big fan of until at least the finish, because then at least, when the crowd reacts like that, it gets you into it a little bit.
Yeah.
But Wardlow, he's so cold right now. Even though they're trying it again with him, it's just, I don't know, it's not working. I mean, he lost the title, so I guess it's not working in kayfabe either. But there's something so cold about him right now that it took me out of it a little bit when this was the next match.
Well, think about this, though. Besides that, I'm talking about the performance aspect. We know a lot of people are cold. They can heat them back up if they're heatable. But Wardlow, he got over his appearance, his size, the dominant powerbomb symphony on all those stooges that he did for so long. And honestly, much like Goldberg, but at the same time, Bill Goldberg is a lot more outgoing and aggressive personality than Wardlow seems to be in real life. But much like his early time, he can be aggressive and he can be intense and he can be explosive for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, whatever the case. But when it has to go longer, that is lacking, and then it only comes in fits and spurts. And I also compare Wardlow to Lex Luger at this stage, because at that time, people were saying, well, Luger looks great. The body's great. Boy, he's got the height and the size, but he can't work. His work's a shits. That's what the boys would say, right? Especially in other territories, but even some in Crockett. We'll lead Luger along through it. Well, that was in 1986, and that was somewhat true. But by 1987, 88, especially, as we've talked about, if you had that Lex Luger in the ring today, he would be goddamn one of the biggest stars in the business, and the guys were still thinking, well, he's green, but he's coming along.
You know what I think is an even better comparison? He's Kevin Nash in 95. Kevin Nash as a heel, as a cool heel bodyguard, got over. Yeah. Eliminating all those guys in the Royal Rumble, the place started cheering for him. He got over as that guy. They said, okay, fans are cheering for him. Let's turn him babyface. And then all of a sudden he became...
And make him smile.
It took his edge off. He didn't really come back until he turned back heel later on.
And then he wore a Christmas sweater.
Right.
But here's the thing. Nash from the start had some element of the big man psychology.
Yes.
And definitely, and that's what his primary strength was from start to the finish, was his big man psychology. But the reason I compared Wardlow to Lex is because Wardlow, he does moves well, and he's very agile, and he can do the swanton and the rolling thing. But he tries too many moves while he's not aggressive in terms of his face, in terms of his body language. His strikes look weak. He looks tentative. He doesn't grab a guy and manhandle him like a big guy should. He's throwing Dino douche, who's as big as he is, rolling him into the ring with a fucking, a whisper and a fucking tickle. It was an indie level big man match that if I was on a scouting trip for the WWF at the time or anybody, I would have evaluated this and said, both these guys should go to OVW. They've obviously just started, but look at their bodies and they are athletic. Maybe we can train them. The problem is they've all been working for several years. But whereas Luger was in the ring every night, either alongside or against the Four Horsemen and the fucking Rock and Roll Express and at midnight, every great talent in the business, and was learning steadily, Wardlow once a week, if that, power bombs somebody or whatever for I don't know how long. And that's been his, and even if he's in class, you can't just train all that in class. Anyway, that's, to me, the announcers were calling the match. That's unusual in AEW. There was some fighting on the floor, but it was at a minimum. There was no furniture. They were trying to have a wrestling match, but Dino's fairly the shits, and Wardlow's still green at presenting himself the way he needs to be to get over. That's what I think.
My Kevin Nash comparison, though, is less about the actual working ability. It's more about the effects of what happened. Again, the fans started cheering for the person naturally. You kind of went with that. And then once the turn happens, once the championship is won by Kevin Nash in WWE, or once Wardlow defeats MJF, it's just a giant letdown from there. It feels like the edge is taken off the person.
Yes.
So that's the comparison
I see your comparison and I raise it, but even the idea is now for him to get them back interested in him, and his performance is not showing that because he's not as intense for as long and against another guy as big who's also green. Point I'm making is Wardlow now is also a live in-concert performance by Strawberry Alarm Clock after they've done Incense and Peppermints. What do you follow it with?
Is he being miscast as a babyface right now?
Probably.
Not that you want to switch people back and forth too much, but he's switched once and he's lost everything that kind of made him popular before he turned.
Well, but one of the things that made him popular was Christian was browbeating him and things. Oh, fuck it. I think we're spending too much time on analyzing his career. Point is, he got beat here in a fairly match. Christian is the best worker and the best talent. He's on the floor. But when Dino drew the referee, Christian grabbed one of the photographer's cameras at ringside and hit Wardlow over the head with it twice, as a matter of fact. And Dino covered him 1, 2, 3. But as I said, there was no comedy. They didn't fight on the floor. There was no furniture. Even though this was not a good match because there was no real leader in the ring, you can still see they're trying to make this show different. Thank fucking God.
To me, this was the only thing on the show I was disappointed with, really. Everything else was kind of a mild surprise at times. And this is the one thing I just didn't like on the show.
We got to hear from Powerhouse Hobbs, but we had to trade that by also hearing from QT Marshall.
I take that back. There was another thing I didn't like on this show.
Well, but at least Hobbs gets to speak. He's not just a mute anymore. But
break him away from QT. That's the only thing holding him back. Why have him with QT?
I don't know. But I've become a fan of Andrade's. He was not bad here. Now, I don't know, maybe it was just I was carried up in the moment of a new television program or whatever, but Buddy Matthews and Andrade, again, this looked more like a wrestling program. Because here's two guys that look good. Buddy's jacked to the gills. He's got a great physique. He reminds me of John Nord a little bit with just his look and his physique and etc. And Andrade was good. And Julia Hart looks great in her gimmick as long as she stays in her gimmick. But it was wrestling again. They were being serious. They were aggressive. They did go to the floor some, but they'd go right back in. And then they'd go out and they'd fight on the table for a second, but they'd go back in. It wasn't like just a free-for-all like we see on Wednesdays. And they told a story. Matthews worked on Andrade's bad arm, but then he hit that Meteora, and this was entirely believable. I don't know how a 250, 60-pound man can do that move and not blow both of his posterior cruciate ligaments, but bless him. But when he hit the Meteora, he hurt his knee and sold that. And there was a story, and during the picture-in-picture, they had doctors in the ring checking on both of them to make sure they could continue. And finally, Andrade made the nice comeback and did the figure four and arched back like Charlotte. That was like, maybe it was a figure six, right? I don't think it was a figure eight. Charlotte gets a higher arch. And Matthews tapped. Matthews has a rotten name and is in a group of goofs that does stupid shit with the lights going on and off. But there's a star under there somewhere. Maybe a crazy heel with a fucking manager with a good name. I don't know. But anyway, they had a good match. And I was hoping for the best. Let's leave on a high note. And then the lights went out. And the lights came back on. And there was Malachi Black and what's his name? Burger King in the ring, the big tattooed fat guy. And they beat up Andrade. And then the lights went out. And we went to the break. So we never found out how these motherfuckers, any of them, got out of the ring. What'd you think?
I wasn't expecting much from the match, and they pulled me in, and I really liked it a lot. It was a good, hard-hitting match with logical storytelling by two big guys. I mean, they both look like they can kick some ass. Good match. You know, the finish plays into the fact that Andrade, I'm doing a little Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly couldn't pronounce his name either. Andrade El Idolo was the janitor at Lido Elementary School, but Andrade El Idolo.
Lido? Oh.
Well, thank you, Boz Cornette. Do you like Boz Skaggs before he went disco?
Hey, low down, baby.
As I was saying, let me make one thing perfectly clear. What was I saying?
You were saying that these guys...
They played into the fact that it's Rhea Ripley's boyfriend and Charlotte Flair's husband with that finish there, which I thought was interesting. Really good match. And again, I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't really into the Wardlow match. I got the Punk interview. I kind of know a little bit of what's coming up the rest of the show. Promising. This match ended up being what I want from modern wrestling in a lot of ways. And then the lights went out, and I fucking groaned. I was like, oh, no. Like, even if you're going to have these goofs on this show, say, keep the Bray Wyatt shit on Wednesday. I don't need this. And yeah, it sucked. And then the lights go out. They don't even give you the courtesy of the lights coming back on and you see them gone from the ring. The lights never come back on.
Yeah.
Everyone's gone. The show's gone at that point. That's the only thing. Even if Malachi and Brody King are going to be featured on this show and the House of Black are, someone needs to be able to say, we're not going to do all the spooky shit. We'll make you guys as badass as you want to be.
Yeah.
But literally no spooky shit. No lights.
Because it also takes them so fucking long. And the announcers are sitting there going, well, I wonder what's going to happen.
The first time it happens, if you've never seen it before, you're like, oh my God, what just happened? The second time, you're like, what do? Do they run out of the ring as soon as it's over? The third time, you're like, yeah, I think they're running into the ring and then running out of the ring and then pretending like they've been there the whole time. It's stupid. It's for children.
Following that thought, oh, wait, I forgot. And there was a Scorpio Sky package. So we might get to see him. He's a good worker. But then Tony Nese and Mark Sterling were in the ring, and thankfully not for long. And then here came Miro. Miro is back, and he came all over the place. Again, he beat the shit out of Tony Nese. He did the 10 beats of Bulgaria, like Seamus and the Brutes do. He won with the camel clutch. He's an impressive beast, a fresh start. And again, I'm astonished that they hid this guy for so long. The first time they brought him in the Mickey Mouse shirt or Minnie Mouse and his little friend Pip and all that stuff. But now he's been gone for so long because he finally, I guess, just told Tony, fuck, when you figure out something to do with me, let me know. And so they came in and they smashed him over. That's exactly what they should have done. And it was a match with a guy that looked like an athlete, Tony Nese, but was clearly overmatched in this pecking order, and Miro gets a dominant win. Exactly what it should have been. What do you think about old Miro?
Happy to see him back. Happy to see him go over. I thought it went too long. He should have just squashed him quickly. He's a comedy figure. He was established as that right before the match started, with Mark Sterling especially. Other than that, I can't complain. Want to see what they're going to do with Miro, who he's going to work with. Happy to have him back. And I guess the only fear is, the House of Black are here and they're doing their spooky shit. Is Miro going to be here and booked well? Or is it going to be like Miro's here and... Because last time he was gone, there were creative differences, right? He didn't want to do whatever Tony was asking him to do.
And Lord knows, since we've seen so much since then, what it was that Tony was asking him to do.
But if used well, I like Miro a lot. I'm a fan of Miro's.
Well, by cracky, we're going to give him a chance here, now that he's straightened up and flying right, as Mama Cornette used to say. What did you think of Storm and So-So against Blue and Willow?
I found myself surprisingly really liking it. And I think part of it was the fans were into it. Sky Blue, hometown girl. And I just watched that RJ City interview with her. So I have this conception of her, or perception of her, I should say. And then I watched the match, and I have to say, I thought she did really, really well. And I think Willow's pretty good. And I like Toni Storm, and Ruby's all right. Soraya just vanished.
She's so-so.
Soraya's just vanished off the show, if you haven't noticed.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is somebody noted that on Twitter? Said, where's Soraya? Is Soraya's gone again, or gone somewhere, or is she hurt, or what's happening?
Nothing has been said publicly, so no one knows. Well,
somebody knows. They're just not saying it. And we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Joe Pedicino knows.
That's right.
I thought this was a good match, actually.
And if you knows Joe like I knows Joe.
I think it was a good match, and I think it was a match that would have probably stunk on a lot of dynamites in front of a dead crowd.
Yeah.
But this was a hot crowd. And again, they were into Sky Blue because she's a local girl. Ruby and Tony. Tony's one of the best in-ring women in the business, but as a heel, she's really good.
I'm not a fan of her new hairdo.
She's a heel.
To be honest with you.
It's great. She's a heel.
But anyway, here's what I didn't like about this.
And I like Willow.
Once they started the match, it was, But the girls jump in fighting on the floor, and Sky Blue's mother is in the front row, and she gets to slap both heels.
No, that was the only bad thing. I agree with that.
One right after the other one. They're both standing there. Slap. Oh, here's one for you. Slap. And then they start the match. And then I was thinking, they've gone so far, they're going to let the girls be the ones to fight on the floor.
Coming off the AEW appearance of Sky Blue, should the mother of them thrown like some matches to a daughter? Should they have played into it? Should they have played into her lighting people on fire? That's my question.
She's not an arsonist. But no, you're right. Sky Blue, especially for the time that she's obviously been in the business, she did some good shit and was looking good. Obviously, they need to let her hopefully grow up, get older, smarter, more personality, more outgoing, more comfortable, something or other than the RJ City interview led us to believe she is personally. But her in-ring for that level of experience is good. Storm and So-So, good heel team for the girls. And, yeah, there you go. And the Babyface's hometown hero went over.
Good match. You won't say it, but I'll say it. Well, good match.
It was a good girls tag team match, especially by AEW standards. How's that? It even gets an extra star for considering an AEW match.
Oh, okay, interesting. Now you're just giving away stars willy-nilly, Uncle Dave. Is that how it works? Well,
everybody can do it, So, Ricky Starks has entered the Owen Hart tournament. And that's pretty much what we heard from him. And then they did the live in-ring interview with the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn. Tony Schiavone was there. it was a good promo to just get them on TV and get themselves over and talk about themselves like we used to do in the old days. And it was short, and they ended up scissoring each other with Tony, but they have nothing specific to talk about. But sometimes, especially considering some of the things Tony has people talking about, it's better to just send guys out and don't let them wear out their welcome. Not a 20-minute monologue like you get on Raw or whatever, but just do an interview, fire people up, do your shit, and make them like you and get the fuck out. So I didn't have a problem with this either. They rapped, Billy talked, Caster talked, they scissored, they're gone.
It was all right. I guess my biggest problem is they still want to challenge for the trios title, which I had conveniently forgotten about. One of the champions was on the show in a singles match, so how prestigious is that championship right now?
Well, what else are they going to say? They got nothing else to say. And they can't challenge for the tag team title because FTR is the only team people probably like more than them.
I'm not a big fan of the Shivani spot, but I wouldn't have used Shivani here. I think you're going for a different look and a different feel. It was a different set. It looked nice. Different commentating team. Dasha on ring announcing, not Justin Roberts. So different ring announcer. I would have gone with a different interviewer than what you get on Dynamite. They used Lexi Nair in the back for some of the stuff. She's good. But I wouldn't have used Shivani. I would kind of really separate Dynamite and this.
He's got the stench of Wednesday night on him.
He's like Mr. Wednesday night. Mr. Wednesday night, Tony Schiavone.
Wednesday night, Tony Schiavone. Everyone knows it's Wednesday. All righty then. And now it's time for our main event of the evening. Samoa Joe and Gin and Juice against FTR and CM Punk. And they gave it to us with 30 minutes left on the air. And the big entrances and the place is ready for it. And I got to tell you, again, besides the fact that this is the first time we've had a chance to see either Jay White or Juice Robinson in a long competitive match with other people that can work and something sensible, instead of just jumping in from behind or doing an angle or having a hoo-ha match, whatever the fuck. There's their top heel team to work with FTR, and there's Samoa Joe. We already know that he and Punk want to work with each other. So this 6-man gave us a tease, and a very good one, of what we can see for the tag team title and what we can see for the Ring of Honor, whatever title Joe has or still has, or potentially the AEW title that Punk may reclaim, or some kind of title. But Punk and Joe and FTR and Gin and Juice are going to be fucking just swell, in my opinion. And I mean, the difference in this, just jotting things down. 6 pros that look like pros, like athletes. They look serious. They're wrestling. Their timing and execution is good. The pacing, the crowd is hot. Good high spots, good action, but it's a struggle. No furniture, no combative parkour, no aggressive tumbling, nothing endless on the floor. The announcing, the production, everything makes this look like a Major League Wrestling show. And that is a completely different vibe on several of those levels than AEW usually reaches, except when, as we mentioned, there was the run that Punk had where his shit made sense, and MJF has reached heights, but overall with the crowd, the announcer, the whole 9 yards, everything, it's not something that we normally see on an AEW TV show that you could say this is as good, or this is competitive, or this company is apparently on the level of the WWE. I mean, am I just overstating this, or did you get that vibe?
I don't want to compare it to WWE right now, but I think it was certainly a clear difference. There was a clear difference, I should say, between this and Wednesday night, and the commentating to me was the biggest thing, because I always say how Excalibur and that Wednesday night team were the least effective commentating team out there. It's the tone, it's what they're saying, it's how they're saying it, it's constantly yelling at you, speed talking to you.
You know, I am not anybody to say on my announcing, constantly yelling, but with conviction, with meaning, with purpose, with delivering information instead of just sounding disingenuous and hokey, and it's over the top, winking, at the audience.
I am a wrestling announcer.
Yes, because they all think they're Mean Gene Okerlund somehow. But and let's while we're talking about the announcing, this was the match, the main event, where Kevin and Nigel were joined by Jim Ross, and boy howdy, apparently everybody knows now. He said it on Twitter. Jim Ross had one of those days, a bad day and bad trip, bad performance, unfortunately. But apparently somewhere or sometime the night before, I guess, or early in the morning that he was supposed to go to the taping, he's at his place in Florida, and he was in a fall and blacked his eye, and it was swollen closed. He tweeted a picture that morning, bad fall, still going to, Chicago for the Dynamite debut. And then when he was able to be in the booth, he had no voice. It was gone. And I have had troubles with my voice in the past. Remember, we had it on the show here, and it was from overuse. When I quit doing announcing and screaming in loud arenas, it's better. But there's no worse feeling than trying to be an announcer and having no voice. It's fucking unbearable. So I felt so bad for him, but he really couldn't contribute. He was trying. But the morning after the show this morning, he basically tweeted out that, he apologized for his performance and is going to step away and heal, is what his quote was. I don't know whether he was sick on top of the fall. I can tell you that if he fell the night before, and obviously it might be hard to get sleep in a situation like that, then he's flown in an airplane from Florida to Chicago, and it's fucking 9:30 Eastern time. If he's been up for 14 hours, JR's 10 years older than I am. That kind of shit makes you lose your voice too. I don't know to that extent, but I felt bad for him, and I hope that he can take a few weeks off and just rejuvenate. But again, the dedication that JR has to I will say about Jim Ross what Jim Hurd once said to Jim Ross about me. I haven't seen such loyalty since Korea. He refuses to call in sick or to not show up or to not be there to do the best he can with whatever. To the point, remember, in Baltimore, he passed a kidney stone in a pre-tape on a pay-per-view and didn't tap out. But he needs to. None of us are as young as we used to be. And I'm not saying that anybody's too old to not be able to do what they used to do, but they sure can't do it as often or for as long. And maybe they ought to try to pick JR spots where he's an analyst for the main events on pay-per-views, and he can come in and do production, during the daytime, not in fucking hectic arenas, not after dragging him across the country with one eye or whatever for 14 hours. That might be a better use of his talents at this point. Or they could just listen to him when he gives the wrestlers some advice on what to do, but he tried that before and they mocked him on Twitter. So there's that. Back to this match. Dax I thought was as smooth as ever, although he makes me nervous because he doesn't wear a sleeve over that knee brace. And I saw the thigh strap on his knee brace was loose. I'm like, oh God, because that's another one of my nervous Nelly, situation, bad knees. But Dax was great, but Cash is phenomenal. And he doesn't get enough recognition for that. Especially that dropkick series he uncorked and some of the other shit that he did. And he's so smooth. And as I said before, now that I've seen Gin and Juice in a real wrestling match, I think they're the top heel team in the company. And they were bringing Jay White in like he was going to be a big singles deal. And I mean, I guess they could still make him a big singles deal, but I think they need to be the tag team. because they're perfect for FTR and they work well together. And then you get, Joe and Punk in there, and they did some good stiff shit. And Joe can still move like he did 15 years ago when he's motivated and involved in something important. He was doing his shit. And I like the babyface team did the Midnight Express.
Who are they?
Midnight Express suplex pickup into the power slam spot.
Midnight Express.
Stop it. I stole that I researched it from Slater and Orton, 1983 Mid-Atlantic. We did it, but the job guys back then weren't great at going up for vertical suplexes, so we switched it to where Stan would fucking pick the guy up in an ass bump and hand him to Bobby, who was sitting on the top rope, and he'd do the spine buster. Anyway, major league looking match. Cash, great buzz sawyer power slam at one point. Juice Robinson might be my new favorite wrestler. And he was
I told you, he's great.
I know, you don't have to keep saying that, though. I told you so, I told you so.
I learned that from you.
Well, you learned too good. But I love Juice. And then finally, Punk got the last big hot tag and made the big comeback, and they did lots of back and forth. And this match had flown by. Instead of being a 30-minute series of chaos that you couldn't keep straight and nobody could possibly ever live through, this was an athletic contest that went back and forth with twists and turns and believable fucking bumps. They stayed in the ring, no dives. And then finally, as I mentioned, Punk made that big comeback, and then they set the deal up where Cash and Punk tagged each other in at the same time, which you can't do. But fuck it, people were with it. But and Kevin Kelly,
you can't do it though,
who is just as quick like that, saw that, and so as not to bury himself, but as not to shit on the match, said, well, they might be taking a little liberty with that tag. And so it was registered and noted, but it was moved on, but you can't do it. And then Punk and Joe stood and traded. Boom, 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 boom. And it broke into a big six-way, and Joe got Punk in the sleeper. And Gin and Juice were holding FTR on either side of the ring so they couldn't make the save. And finally, FTR came out. Cash hit that big body block of Jay White, I think, off the apron, and Dax saved the Punk from Joe with the headbutt to the back, and that was brilliant.
I thought there was a chance Joe was going to choke him out there. They got me.
And they milked it enough that you bought it, but then they didn't go too long that it lost the momentum. And then FTR broke it up just in time, but that was brilliant because they've showed that Joe would have choked Punk out, and even the announcer said it. If it hadn't been for FTR, Joe would have choked Punk out. And that can be brought back in a single situation. And at the same point, FTR cleared the path of Gin and Juice and then saved Punk. And then FTR hit the big rig on Juice, and who took a bump and bounced into Punk's go to sleep. 1, 2, 3. And what a finish. It built bigger. It wasn't like they did every big move they knew. And then when they were done with that, somebody just won with a simple thing or tapped out or whatever. It was that they built it. And finally it was slam, bang, pow. 1, 2, 3. And then a big pop. And I'm losing my voice like JR from staying up and watching too much wrestling. But that's the way you build a finish, and then you blow it off, and then you pay it off, and then the people loved it. This was the best six-man tag match in AEW history. Now, I know that ain't saying much because normally they're the shits. But they proved here you can have a good one if you try and you know what you're doing. By far, this was the best six-man tag they've ever had. And it wasn't for their bullshit trios title. It was just 6 guys, 3 on each side that wanted to fight each other. So, again, we don't know what the ratings are. This is Sunday morning. I guess. Good God. I don't know if this is planet Earth anymore.
It's afternoon now.
Well, there you go. We talked too long. But we won't get ratings for a few days. We'll see. It's a new show. It's Saturday night, et cetera, et cetera. But one would think that if they keep doing shows like this without the silliness and the softness, that they'll get some of the disaffected fans back. They're going to get the punk fans. And if they keep having wrestling like that, then they may get some of the wrestling fans that have given up on all this other bullshit. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I would think that they will have a better audience retention on this program because the last two segments were just as good as the first one was.
All right. Well, that was AEW Collision.
You have no opinions? Are there no opinions? No workhouses?
Well, to your overall thought, I think the most important thing, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't like the House of Black Blackout segment, even though I like Buddy Matthews' match, I want a different tone here. I think the experiment should be a different tone. Let's see how a serious tone. The original concept of a sports-based wrestling product. Mid-South 2023. Let's try to do that. And it was a promising start. Excellent six-man tag match. FTR looked great. Juice Robinson, I'm telling you, he's really good. And I think Jay White, when you see him in the States, you realize he's not that everyone has to be a bigger guy, but he's not a bigger guy. And him and Juice together fixes that.
Yeah.
Because Juice has some size to him. The crowd, when Joe and CM Punk squared off, this is with zero time being spent on TV building up the history of these two guys. Showing the old ROH tapes. Zero time.
Which he owns, by the way.
Which I'm sure we're going to see clips of and interviews about pretty soon. And that was the reaction these guys got just squaring off. That was promising. FTR, I think there's something with FTR to be said for mentally working against people who you know you're not going to have an issue with behind the scenes or whatever else. Working with people you want to work with. Again, the new show, the new tone. I think it showed in the work there. These seemed like guys happy. Not that, happy, hey, they're smiling and shit, but they seemed like they were happy to be doing this.
They were motivated. They were working hard. You could tell there was extra aggression, we've all got something to prove here. We want to stand out.
Because they've seen the other side of the coin. A few weeks ago, they would have been in that Aubrey match on Friday night on Rampage. That was what these guys were mixed up with. Mark Briscoe and Jarrett and all that. And now here they are doing this. And it was an excellent match. Can't wait to see what they're going to do with Punk and Samoa Joe. You have to think Punk and MJF long-term has to be a thing because he still has the belt. But we have a world champion. I thought this was an excellent debut episode. Other than the Wardlow match, I liked every match, although the Miro match I thought was too long. But promising. I mean, now it's going to be really interesting going from this to Wednesday night, just seeing the difference in the tone of the show and the quality of the show and who's on the show. The opening video here, it was noticeable who wasn't in the video. No Bucks.
Yeah.
No Adam Page, no Omega. I don't think it was Moxley.
I was disturbed to see Pockets was still there. And my God, that's a pox that they can't infect a brand new program with. But
it is Tony's personal religion because Tony loves Orange Cassidy. And Tony believes he's doing special stuff with Orange Cassidy. And Tony is...
Yeah, the word special could apply in there somewhere.
And Tony's insistent on converting non-believers into being believers. If a wrestler doesn't get it or doesn't want to do something with him, Tony will try to get them to understand the brilliance of Orange Cassidy. Which is why he's going to put him on this show, because he wants to stuff him down your throat.
Well, I'm going to cough him back up. But anyway, I thought this was a great debut show also, and it's not as laborious to watch as Wednesday night. It's not nearly as silly. It wasn't as repetitive. There was some control with the guys to what they were doing so that everybody's match stood out as somewhat different. And just some logic.
No Justin Roberts, no Excalibur, no Shivani.
No Bar Brady.
No Bar Brady. Hate to put Taz in that mix, but, Taz, Renee Paquette, various people who are the sounds and the faces of Dynamite were not here. Shivani shouldn't have been here, but I think that's important. Set a different tone to the people who are already disinfected by AEW. Let them know there's something else to embrace.